Hello, my name is Conlin. I am the deputy editor of Michigan Alumnus magazine, produced by the Alumni Association of the University of Michigan. I am so pleased to be here today with Matthew VanBesien, the president of the University Musical Society, who I first had the privilege to interview 3 years ago, right before he took on this new role, and little did he know how action-packed it was going to be. Of course, just now seeing the video announcing the 2021 season, which also happens to be the 142nd season of UMS, it reminded me of the countless performances I have attended at Hill Auditorium, the Power Center, and numerous other Southeast Michigan venues over decades, having also grown up in Ann Arbor and graduated from U of M. Sadly, we know the pandemic has now altered that original season. But thankfully, Matthew is now going to tell beloved fans like me how he and his team have come up with ways to safely entertain, engage, and educate us in the coming months despite the virus. And I'm sure he will also tell us how easy it has been to pivot everything in the last 3.5 months. Not. So, Matthew, let's just start by talking about the mission of UMS and the thought process your team went through once the pandemic hit. How did you decide to move forward and develop a safe way for the fall season to proceed?
Well, thank you, Jen, for doing this today. And I just want to say hello and welcome to everyone watching online. All of us at UMS send you our very best wishes. We send you our thanks for your really steadfast support. I know I speak for all of my colleagues and members of the board and our councils and volunteers that throughout all of the last 4 months, all of us have felt incredibly supported throughout. We felt valued, we felt supported in really every way by our ticket buyers, by our donors, by just people in the community who really value and love UMS for all that it is. So it's always a pleasure to come and talk to you, Jen, but to also take this moment just to right out of the gate to say thank you to everyone out there, because UMS is a great organization, not just for what it does, but because of the people inside the organization and the people in our community who really support it. So first and foremost, thank you. Yeah, it's been kind of a crazy 4 months, and we talked at the very beginning of my tenure 3 years ago, Jen, and it's been a really amazing time for me to really learn this community, to really learn the breadth and the incredible accomplishments of UMS. We have such a great team here. When faced with a pandemic or with any kind of catastrophic event, and those of us who've had the privilege of working in the arts for many years, some of us have worked through financial crises, some have worked through hurricanes, in my case, in 2 different states. There was certainly 9/11. I don't think any of us have experienced something like this. So it really brings you back to what you're all about and what you're here to do. And for us, our mission has become that much more important during this time. So it's really about inspiring people, really figuring out ways to really help and enrich this community. And we do that in a variety of ways, but really we think about connection and connectivity as being a really central theme, of connection with our artists, with our audiences, with students, with different communities across Southeast Michigan. We always are looking for those uncommon ways to really engage people. So in this time in which we're not presenting on the main stage, it's still important to think about how are we going to connect with people.
Right. So part of that is in person, as I understand it, and part of it will be digital. And when you looked at in person, for instance, how did you decide that it was safe for people to get back into the theater?
Well, the first decision really is an even more fundamental one than that, which is, are you going to have a season? And I think that is, for lack of a better analogy, that's the elephant in the room here for a lot of folks, which is when they're seeing major arts organizations around the country cancel their fall season, or in a few instances cancel the entire season, you have to ask yourself, well, what are we here to do, and what can we do? And I think hearkening back to that mission, I think all of us at UMS felt like whatever we can do to fulfill that mission for our audiences and for our community, that's what we should endeavor to do. So it's really starting from that premise. And also one of good safety. Nothing that we're contemplating for this season upcoming that we've announced or have yet to announce will happen unless we feel that we can really provide the safest possible environment for our audiences. We're going to give people options. We're going to give them safety protocols and parameters. We don't want anything to happen to our audiences. We want only good things to happen for the artists who come here. So all of those things really guide what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So, we announced on July 1st a bunch of things. We announced some things that were just going to go away or be pushed into a future season. We announced things that were going to be sort of reconfigured or reimagined, given either our inability to get artists or a company here, or the inability to present it physically. And then we talked about the digital space, which of course we're utilizing right here and right now. And I think, frankly, all of us have utilized the digital space way more than we thought we would 4 or 5 months ago. Maybe some days too much. But the digital space has taught us a few things over the last 4 months. It's taught us and reminded us what the digital space does not substitute for in terms of human interaction. But it also has shown us that there's some really cool, engaging ways to use digital technology and this virtual space. So as we looked through the season, we didn't want to just, frankly, have artists replicate what they were going to do on the Hill Auditorium stage, but rather think about how to use the digital space creatively as it pertains to their artistry and their voice as an artist, and also what would really benefit UMS audiences.
Right, and I know we're going to hear so much more about the benefits of that digital space and all of the different things we might see in the second half of this. So if I do actually come to Hill Auditorium, I know performances, I think, will be shorter. What am I going to sort of see when I show up at the theater if I come in person?
Sure. So we're all operating in real time right now. So we announced a bunch of changes really for the September and October months, and every month from now on we're going to be announcing updates, changes, alterations to things that happen in subsequent months. But if you look at the first couple of months in September and October, one of the only indoor kind of normal UMS performances are going to be performances by the Takash String Quartet. But we are definitely going to be doing shorter performances without intermissions. We're going to have significantly less audience, probably really in the 10 to 20%. So for instance, in Rackham Auditorium, I think our plan is to have 150 people only in a venue that holds 1,100 normally. We're going to do some timed entries and exits to facilitate social distancing during the beginning and ends of concerts. And then everything else that's really going to be there in terms of protection: face masks, hand sanitizers, frequent cleaning and disinfecting of all the high touch areas. So we're going to really be thinking about every possible facet of how we operate and produce a concert. And I just want to reassure our audiences, if we get to these points during the season where we're planning to do something live and the situation has changed materially, then we're going to rethink that, of course. It's always going to be informed by public health and always going to be informed by safety.
So somebody like me who's a season ticket holder, how do I go about switching some of my tickets? That I know some of my performances, like the Berlin Philharmonic, will come in a year, but what about some of my other tickets?
Right, so you have a lot of options, and we always want to give people options. We had, I think, nearly 20 performances canceled at the end of this past season, starting in the middle of March. And we gave people options from the very beginning, very, very clear options. You can always have your tickets fully refunded. You can look at changing those tickets into something else that happens or is planned to happen later in the season. Or if you really don't feel like you want to look at those options, you can very kindly consider donating those tickets to the organization. But you can always call our ticket office to help. That number is 734-764-2538, and I know that we're going to flash that up on the screen a little bit later. You can do it online. You have an account on ums.org, tickets.ums.org. So you can always call, you can always get online. We want to give people as many clear options as they need. And if there's not an option that you see that fits you, then please call us. We're here to work with you, and we really want to take care of all of our wonderful ticket buyers.
But now somebody who wants to see one of these digital productions in New Zealand would they be able to watch?
Absolutely. So you'll hear a little bit about some special projects that we have with some really wonderful artists today from two of my colleagues. I think one of the real advantages for the digital space, and I think you're seeing this and have seen it in the last several months, is the ability to reach way, way beyond your normal sort of region and audience base. So as we think about our digital offerings, again, I made that comment that we didn't want to just replicate a 2-hour concert in Hill Auditorium in the digital space. So as we think about this next year, whether it's Paul Taylor, whether it's the wonderful young cellist Sheku Kanemason and his sister Isata, whether it's the Takash Quartet, whatever we're thinking of, we're trying to make it feel unique and bespoke for UMS audiences. Bespoke because of who that artist is and what they represent and how they think. But also we know how unbelievably inquisitive and intellectually curious our audience is here. And so we want to provide unique things. And then where that helps us is I think that we're going to have unique things that we can then push out well beyond Ann Arbor, well beyond Southeast Michigan. But again, our prime objective is always to think about our own backyard.
So for instance, with Paul Taylor Dance, they were going to be here, now they're not. So what, right. I think you've announced what that digital offering will be, right?
So my great colleague, Michael Konjolka, he worked so long and hard with the company, and the company had lost an entire fall tour. They had lost their long residency at Lincoln Center this fall because Lincoln Center has completely shuttered its doors for the fall. And yet the company was so amazing because they kept saying, what we're here to do is really perform for live audiences. So it was a long time coming, but everyone realized that it was going to be impossible for them to come. But we're thrilled that their artistic director, Michael Novak, we have a wonderful dance professor, Angela Kane from the University of Michigan, the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, who's actually a scholar of Paul Taylor's work. So we're going to have special web viewings of classic Paul Taylor choreography and performances by the company. And also really a digital experience that's very customized for Ann Arbor audiences around the history of Paul Taylor. So that's just an example of how we're not saying to our audiences, you bought a ticket, we're just going to give you a Paul Taylor webcast. We're actually going to try to create a digital experience for our audiences so that they come away from that feeling that they've not only experienced the Paul Taylor company on some level, but learned and gained real insight into his artistry and the company, what they're all about.
So it kind of can be almost more than we would get in a performance that was, live, because there's so many other facets that you can bring to the table.
I think each audience member is going to have to judge what works for them. We really appreciate the fact that we're not able in many cases to offer the live event, and yet we want to be as creative as we can. And I just can't thank my colleagues. The entire UMS team has been amazing. They've worked just nonstop since the closure back in March. And the programming and the education and community engagement team in particular, along with marketing and patron services, everyone has worked together to really come up with these offerings in an incredibly creative and thoughtful way.
Well, and I can't imagine once you are live again that anyone will not want to be live and with you that way. But I could see how these digital offerings would continue, and it's a whole new platform.
Absolutely. I think we're going to grow. I think we're going to learn. As challenging as this moment is for us as an arts organization, we're trying to embrace it as fully as we can, and we're trying to really figure out what can we gain from this experience that really helps us now, but also helps us for the longer term. And I think all of us, and I'm sure you would feel this way about your own work, that all of a sudden we've been forced to embrace the digital space like never before, and we found some things along the way that are actually very, very beneficial that we weren't maybe really utilizing previously.
Great. So I don't know, I think we have a question from the audience. Okay. How will you determine seat priority and assignments?
Oh my gosh, well that's a great question that I'm probably the worst person to ask about that, but I will say to you that our priority is to make sure that we take care of longtime subscribers and ticket buyers exactly in the way that they've been taken care of in the past. So they'll be assigned seats from the very beginning as if it was going to be a normal performance. And then from a priority standpoint, when we look at reduced capacities in a live venue, they will be prioritized in terms of how they were seated initially. So we will make sure that we can take care of everyone. And we will also make sure that in the case of Takash, even though we're only going to do a concert for 150 people, we're asking the quartet to do 3 of those concerts. So we're going to be able to take care of everyone through multiple performances, even though we have that reduced capacity. So I really urge everyone who is a ticket holder out there to not just really pay close attention to the communications that we're sending, but always feel that you can reach out to our patron services office and have a conversation with them, because your care and the support that you're giving us, we really want to make sure that you're cared for during all this.
Fantastic. So I don't know if there are any other questions that have come in, because if there aren't, we're going to move on and bring in your colleagues.
That will be great.
Oh, there is a question. Hold on. Will student tickets still be available this season?
Yeah, student tickets are absolutely going to be available. It's one of the things we're most proud of here at UMS. And even with some of the reduced capacities, we will find a way for students to attend UMS performances. It's part and parcel as to who we are. And there's no way that we would ever not think about student engagement at performances, in workshops, and master classes throughout the year. So the short answer is yes.
Great. Okay, so I think we'll bring in Michael and Cayenne. Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Okay.
Hello.
We have here the longest serving and least longest serving members of the staff of UMS. So Michael Kanjolka is Vice President for Programming and Production and has been there more than 30 years. And Cayenne Harris has been there since February and is the new Vice President for Engagement and Community Education, Education and Community Engagement. And I had the pleasure to meet her in March, right after you started, at the Yo-Yo Ma concert. And then we went into lockdown. So I think I said welcome then, and I'll say welcome again now, but it's fabulous to have you two with us. And I know you all enjoy working together. So before we move into the digital, interesting residential program that's starting up, I wanted to ask Matthew about his relationship with Wendell Pierce, who's going to be an actor who's going to be collaborating with you all this fall. He's one of my favorite actors. He's appeared in Selma. He was in The Wire. Actually, I really liked Waiting to Exhale as well. And he played Willie Loman on the West End in London recently in Death of a Salesman. So how is it that you came to bring him into the UMS experience?
Well, it's great. I think we all 3 of us here now have a relationship with Wendell and have gotten to know him, over the past weeks and months. It's almost a year ago when one of Michael's colleagues in the programming area, Mark Jacobson, and I were in Chautauqua at the festival in Chautauqua in New York, really there for Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. But Wendell was there performing with them, and Wendell and Wynton are longtime, really childhood friends from New Orleans. And Wendell literally came up and introduced himself to us when he knew we were from UMS, and we really just started talking a little bit and sort of saying, well, look, maybe there's an opportunity for you to come to Michigan at some point. All of us who have the privilege of working in the arts have these chance encounters, if you will, with really amazing artists and kind of luminaries like him. And you just never know what might be possible. And so we kept in touch briefly. Wynton actually connected me with Wendell later on, and I happened to be in London during his run of Death of a Salesman. And Michael and Cayenne know this. I mean, it was just for me one of the most riveting it was an all black cast, of Arthur Miller. It was just really it was an amazing production that came from the Young Vic Theater, and Wendell himself was just an absolutely riveting Willy Loman. And when I saw him backstage afterwards, he kindly invited us backstage. He had already kind of known and done some homework about UMS and kind of known what kind of programming we did and what we've been up to. And I just had this really great feeling. And so we've kept that conversation, if you will, going with him. And, this is the other thing about this crazy moment in which we all find ourselves. In some ways, there are opportunities to engage artists like Wendell that frankly might not be as easy or even possible at all because, things are just always so fast and furious, especially in the TV and film world. So we're thrilled. I'm going to turn it over to Michael and Cayenne because they're really working so closely on these projects. But I think, bringing Wendell to the table, bringing Joyce DiDonato to the table, bringing a range of artists nationally, internationally, and from the Detroit and Southeast Michigan region is something that I think we're all incredibly excited about. And again, we want to do it in unique and special ways. And Michael and Cayenne will talk to you a little bit, I think, about how we're thinking about that specifically.
Yeah, so Michael, I know you said, you made a point in a conversation I heard earlier about, yes, audience members are sad about having to stay home, but artists are also having to stay home and how difficult that is. And so you guys have come up with this digital artist residency, which sounds so wonderful for everybody, all the stakeholders. Can you tell us a bit about that? I know I've been getting things from UMS all spring that have been sort of digital offerings that were archived things you had, but this is a whole new program, isn't it?
Sure is. And I'm glad you bring that up, Jen, because it's important for everyone to know that artists are hurting right now. And we have an obligation as a leadership organization to really support them during this time. And it's one of the big whys of that's sort of driving our development of this digital residency program. You've already mentioned the fact that we're doing it to deliver mission. We're also delivering it to build capacity, both for artists and for UMS that will carry us into the future. This isn't just a program that will exist during this moment. It's really something that will carry us forward and really inform how we think about doing our work in the future. I think some of the future, Cayenne and I have had a lot of fun working on this.
Yeah.
It's uncharted territory for us. And so the creativity that's driving us forward is both exciting and energizing and sometimes daunting. I think that some of the goals and features of this program, this digital residency program that people can expect will be, as Matthew said, original bespoke content, artists leading the way, artists showing us the way. This is not a sort of UMS prescription that we're asking artists to fulfill. We are going to really engage creatively with artists to, decide and figure out what these outputs in the digital space will look like. As Matthew said, it's not going to be just performances broadcast from a stage. This is going to be art making for a digital frame. So we've been thinking and having conversations with artists to really make sure they're comfortable and excited about working within the digital frame. Most importantly for me is the fact that once and for all, we're going to create a model for ourselves to open up what creativity looks like and make that visible and legible to audiences. And in many cases, once we've made it visible and legible, audiences will in a near future season have the opportunity to see the work on stage. So you're going to have this sort of dual experience of engagement through the digital frame that will then lead us back into the theater where we can fully accept the work and hopefully engage with it in a deeper, more meaningful way. And maybe the last goal and feature that is most exciting for me is the fact that because it's in this frame, it's in this digital space, it just creates a completely different kind of accessibility for the broadest set of audiences. One other thing I'll say, and then Cayenne, you know, you always have to get off the hook with me. I think people can expect outputs that are aspirational and complex. I mean, there are a couple of conversations we're having with Wendell right now that are very exciting and, you know, are going to take a lot of work to figure out how to create. But I think that people can also expect a wide range of what I refer to as casual experiences, conversations, interviews, you know, viewing parties with artists looking at work that they're excited about sharing, and on and on and on. So the sky's the limit.
Well, and that makes you, you know, part of the art making process.
That's right. That's right. It's really different for this organization, to be perfectly honest. I mean, this is really much more living in a producing space and much less in a presenting space. And that's a good thing. Cayenne, I'll shut up now.
I think I can just add that we've really tried to think about a group of artists, some of whom are going to be really familiar to UMS audiences, and some of whom are really fresh. They're going to be names that you might not know, but whose work you really will want to know. And just to amplify what Michael said, I think one of the incredible opportunities here is not only to provide something for the audience who is so near and dear to us, but to understand the opportunity that comes when we're not bound by a theater space, and who might be able to come into concert with us and come into engagement with us who hasn't been a part of our audience in the past. That makes me really excited.
Yeah.
So yeah, are you looking at kind of a broad and diverse mix of new and emerging artists? I mean, how are you finding your people?
Well, we've announced 3 artists that we're working with, and I'm quite confident that in the next few weeks we'll be able to announce a couple more. We've talked about Wendell already. The one data point on Wendell that we haven't said, in getting to know him, I've really been impressed with his creativity and actually his kind of entrepreneurship. He's got this entrepreneurial mind. Fast Company named him one of the 100 most creative people in business. So there's that angle to know about Wendell as well, which I think is pretty cool. And you want to talk about Brian, Cayenne?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Brian LaBelle, yeah. So this was an artist who I was not familiar with before we started entering into these conversations, but he is a alum. He lives in the UK. I would say his work kind of lives in the fringe experimental theater realm, but he is maybe one of the most down-to-earth, funny, and exciting and engaging people that I've encountered, virtually at least. Incredibly creative. Some of his work really delves into the idea of wellness and also sickness. And that's something that resonated with us as we were thinking about this time that we're all living through and what it means to be well, and also what it means to be threatened by illness. The projects that we've been talking with him about are quirky, beautiful. There's a sort of whole range of experiences that I think Brian alone will be able to deliver, and he has a group of artists who he works with who will be part of the project as well. In every case, I think with every artist, we're having conversations about what happens in the digital frame, but also are there opportunities for community-facing work? Are there opportunities for student engagement? So how do those important parts of our community get brought into this whole magical mixture? So I think, again, it's a really interesting mix, and I think there will be experiences that are surprising and unusual. And I think that really fits with UMS's mission.
So as well, UMS has the mission always around education. Mm-hmm. So how are you going to be adapting that kind of K through 12 work in the community in light of the pandemic?
Yeah, great question. And thanks for asking that, Jen. we all know that schools are in a very challenging place. So when COVID hit, teachers were suddenly in a place where they had to teach virtually. We're dealing with inequities of access to internet and technology. Now, as we're looking at fall, there are big questions about how do students safely come back into a school environment? Can they safely come back into a school environment? And so as UMS, my feeling, our first priority is to think about how we can be a resource and how we can be helpful in this time. So one thing that we've already begun, that we started actually a few months ago, is we established an initiative called UMS Performance Playground. And our thought was to try and create some resources that would be really useful to students and teachers while they're learning in an online environment. We were able to use some of our really fabulous teaching artists who typically work in classrooms and are working in partnership with teachers. And we tasked them with actually filming themselves from home without a film crew, without a lot of resource, but in really thinking about how to offer lessons in the arts that would keep students engaged, maybe in school, maybe at home while they're sheltering with their families. As we look to fall, we're bringing that into greater focus. We know that there's going to be some significant disruption to the typical learning experience, no matter what, in the best of circumstances. And we really can't predict right now exactly what that looks like. We're getting bits of information, but of course, what's happening in Ann Arbor may be a little bit different than what's happening in other parts of this region. So we have to think broadly about what we can do, how we can serve this really important group. We are looking at how we adapt traditional programs that we've offered for many years so that we can continue to deliver on our mission. And I think the thing I feel really confident about is that we will be able to offer meaningful arts education experiences and performance experiences for students, no matter what. It's just going to look a little bit different. Our delivery is going to be different because we want to do it in a way that's safe. And we want to do it in a way that is really in service of teachers right now and in service of students right now, supporting all of the needs that they have and understanding that the arts continue to be important, but there are lots of other priorities as well.
And this must kind of also be changing up how you work with faculty and students at the university as well.
Yeah, so you've caught on to a theme, which is that nothing is normal.
Yeah, innovation, innovation, innovation.
Yeah, we're all about adapting, pivoting, finding creative solutions. And I don't want to be too much of a Pollyanna because there are certainly disappointments. And I know everybody in the university community is mourning the loss of, what a sort of normal fall semester might be. But we're also finding a lot of openness, a lot of interest in figuring out what we can do, how we can really create some exciting moments for students who are returning to campus to safely engage with us. I'm hearing constantly from faculty about, who do you have coming? What about these digital artist residencies? Are there ways for students to have access to these artists that you're bringing to be a part of this project? And so, again, I feel like we will only fail if we don't try. Yeah. And there's a ton of opportunity, understanding that nothing replaces the live performance experience, and that's something unique and special that we will all celebrate the opportunity to experience. And in as much as we can offer it on a small scale this season, we're so excited for that. As Matthew said, there will be student tickets. But in other ways, what are the opportunities that present themselves when we're working through the digital frame? And so we're really trying to take that approach.
So one last question before we go to questions, if there are some from our participants out there in the digital world. Is there any one specific partnership you're really excited about in the coming year? Because I know you partner with regional institutions too.
We do. And as much as I'd like to say there's one, I can't pick a favorite child, because in fact our strategy and the strategy that I'm developing, I think really importantly, will include many partnerships and collaborations. And we are in dialogue right now with partners here in Ann Arbor, in Ypsilanti, in Flint, in Dearborn, in Detroit. So I'm excited about all of those partnerships. I feel like it's really important to say that some of the partnerships that we are working on have actually been in place for many years, and we're revitalizing. We're looking at from this vantage point, what can we do now? And in other cases, we're looking at forging a brand new relationship. So sorry, I can't choose one.
That's okay. I think I heard something about the Charles Wright Museum, which always gets me excited as a reporter that covered Detroit for a long time.
We love the Wright Museum, and they're in fact one of our partners, and we have many other important partners throughout the region.
Fantastic. Yes, watch this space, and we'll see what comes up. I think we have questions from the audience. I think there was one that came in about okay. For those shows that are viewed digitally, is there any thought to having a Zoom post-show chat discussion with the artist?
Yes.
Yeah.
Michael.
No, I'm happy to just report that one of the digital pivots we're going to be offering, I was actually on the phone with London today. Sheku and his sister Isata are doing a special digital recital for Ann Arbor. But in addition to pre-recording that, they're going to join Ann Arbor and all of us in a space very similar to this to view the recital together, and then have, half hour, 45 minutes of interaction, question taking with audience, and, again, create something very personal and connected to our community. So I would imagine that you'll see quite a bit of that.
I'm just going to add, for those who don't know, that Sheku was the young Black cellist who played at Harry and Meghan's wedding.
He sure
Very
was.
excited.
Yeah.
And his sister.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Okay. And any other questions? Okay. This one's probably for Matthew. Suppose a vaccine is only 50% effective. How will that affect 2021 and beyond?
I'm not sure I'm remotely qualified to answer that in terms of what happens when there's a vaccine with 50% efficacy. I would just go back to sort of saying, kind of going back to the way we started today, which is that, UMS has really tried to approach and embrace this moment as, yes, there are lots of limitations, but we want to be in this for the long haul, and we want to stay in, in this engaging role with our audiences. And we're working on this in real time. And I would say, I know Michael and Cayenne can back this up. I mean, literally from the time 2 weeks before July 1st in our announcement, and now the national landscape has changed in terms of rising infection rates in many states, including our own, sadly. So we know that we are not a subscriber to the idea that once a vaccine is in place, that everything is going to be fine. No matter what transpires, we will have to look at the public health guidance, guidance from the governor's office, guidance from our colleagues and peers at the University of Michigan, guidance from communities, and also really listening to our audiences. We're never going to want, even if something is technically safe or deemed to be safe, we want to hear our audiences and really make sure that they're comfortable going into spaces. So whenever we resume things that approach normalcy, we will continue to offer options for people. So an option for digital, an option to experience the concert in a different way. We know that kind of optionality will really be important.
So we have one last question that has come in, but having said that, we were going to ask, before we answer that, does anyone want to add anything else? Otherwise, this is a good last question maybe to end with. You're all good? You've said all you need to say. You've done it well, I would add. Okay, so our last question is, are you going to make the live streams and digital versions of concerts available? And will you charge for them?
This is slightly more complicated. I would say, harkening back to some things that you said earlier, one of our biggest goals for the digital space is to provide accessibility. So unlike some other institutions and nationally and internationally, like the Metropolitan Opera, who I would add have been making a lot of their content available with no charge during this time. We're not really looking at the digital space at this point as a direct monetization space. In other words, we're not really approaching this from a standpoint of how much can we charge people for them. We're looking for people to really benefit from these experiences and to really reach both our existing audiences and new audiences and people that might not have had access to what UMS does. So I think the short answer is no. I mean, there are, can we imagine a situation somewhere down the road where there might be a charge? Maybe, maybe not. But I think our primary philosophy going into this is how do we continue to engage audiences near and far in as accessible a way as we can. And Michael and Conlin be happy to jump in and set me straight.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think that, Jen, the last thing I'd like to say, because it came up in a team meeting today, is that I'm very proud of this organization because we've made the decision that we're going to try.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to deliver in a variety of different ways. And sometimes we might not be able to go through with it. Sometimes we may fail, but at least we can be the organization that stands back and say, hey, we tried, especially in this moment where we're seeing lots of organizations, sometimes for good reason, having to say, this is too hard and we're just not going to do anything. And I'm just really proud of the fact that we're the kind of organization that thinks that way.
Well, and as one of your #1 fans, I am very proud of UMS for going into this new space and for not canceling the whole season. I will wear my mask. I will come into the smaller concerts and into Hill Auditorium, and I will sign up for all the digital performances I can because I've been enjoying what I've been seeing coming out of all over the world. And I truly, one of the reasons I moved back to Ann Arbor after 20 years of living in big cities with big culture was because of UMS, because it's just the most wonderful institution we have in Ann Arbor, perhaps besides the university. And so I wish you guys all the luck and 142 more seasons, however they look like going way into the future. But thank you for talking to all of us today. Thank you for all the work you've been doing. And we just wish you good luck. And we know you'll be flexible. We know you'll keep us safe. And thanks just for all that hard work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Michael.
Okay,
and thanks to everyone out there.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.